Well, hello and welcome to a new video. Today we are going to compare ABH Sultry palette with a Dupe W7 Seduced palette. This, in my opinion, is not so much a dupe as it is a clear ripoff. I don't know how I feel about these kind of situations, to be honest with you. On one hand, it's fair game, you know, like someone comes out with a product and then you think you can do the same thing for cheaper and that way sell. Okay, fine. It's just, there's inspiration and then there's clear copy. In makeup and in everything, actually, people always get inspiration from someone else, somewhere else, you know, whether they do it on purpose or not. That's okay, that's one thing. But to come out with a palette that's the exact same, down to the packaging, yeah, that's kind of stealing. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the purpose for some people to buy that because this palette from ABH was, I believe, 50 euros. It's not even made anymore. I think it was limited edition. And this one, how much was this? I don't remember. I'll put the price here, but it was definitely very cheap. So I get that if you love makeup and you love the color story in ABH Sultry and you want to get that, but you cannot afford to spend 50 euros on a palette, then I understand your willingness to buy something like this. But I just think it's shady on the part of the brand. I'm not accusing the customer here. If you bought this palette, I'm not saying, oh, you shouldn't, because think of all the people who spend so much time and effort on this palette. I mean, it's fine. ABH is fine. I don't think they will suffer financially from this. But yeah, I'm blaming mostly the brand W7. And I don't really know much about this brand. I know it's sold here in Belgium, I believe, at the D stores. I've seen a few things here and there, and every time I see a palette, it's an exact dupe. Well, not a dupe, it's a copy. To me, a dupe is another product that does the same thing as one product in particular that gives the same kind of effect. Maybe I'm being shady, but I don't think that this is going to be as good as this one, to be honest with you. And like I said, the goal here was not to create a product, and it just so happens that it gives a similar effect as another one. No, the goal was clearly to rip off the color story and the packaging. So I bought this a very long time ago, honestly. I bought this with in mind the idea to make a video comparing the two before I even had a channel, by the way. But I was like, oh my god, this is shameless. I need to get this and to actually compare and see what it looks like. Because it took me a little while to work up the courage and the nerve to start my YouTube channel, I have had this sitting in my collection for months and months and months, and I really wanted to give it an actual first impression, so I'm not cheating, I'm showing you. I have never touched this. So we're gonna start with the swatches, and then I'll do half my face with ABH and the other half with W7. Okay, so let me just show you what we have side by side. So on first impressions, okay, so this one is smaller, definitely, but what I can tell you for sure is that the shimmers in here are nothing close to the shimmers in ABH. I love the Sultry palette, by the way. This was one of my first high-end palette that I bought, and it's attached to great memories, so I love this palette. Within these two palettes, there are 7 mattes and 7 shimmers, so let's swatch the mattes first. For Anastasia, we have Fresh. For W7, we have Lace. For Anastasia, we have Twig. And for W7, we have Touch. At least they came up with different names. I mean, if you gotta find something nice to say. We have for ABH, Dystopian. And for W7, the shade is called Vamp. We have Slate for ABH. Must for W7. We have no more space on my arm. Okay, yeah, let's switch it like this. We have Birch for ABH. And Silk for W7. Bloom for ABH. Aphrodisiac. Whoa. Okay. Aphrodisiac for W7. And finally, we have the black shade, which is called Noir with an ABH. And Fishnets. That's funny. For W7. Yeah, the black usually says a lot. Okay, so, most of these I would say are pretty okay and similar. There may be a bit more chalky, like this one seems a little bit more chalky, but it's fine. Color-wise, it's very similar. This one definitely said that was Twig, which is, by the way, my favorite color, my favorite matte color in the palette. This is definitely less pigmented and a bit more brown in the W7 palette. The brown here, you know, same thing, less pigmented, less potent in the W7 palette. Again, same thing for that gray here, as well as for this camel kind of color. It doesn't really show camel on my arm, but in the palette it does. Now this one, I was actually very much surprised because this is very pigmented. And then we have the black, like I said, a very good, strong, intense pigmented black is something you usually don't see in affordable palettes. Here I would say it's okay. Like the black from ABH is definitely top notch. It is an amazing black. This one you can see is not as black, is not as deep and pigmented, but for an affordable palette, it's an okay black. Honestly, it's not bad. The amount of wipes I'm gonna go through today, let me tell you. All right, let's now move on to the shimmers. And like I said, from what I'm looking down here, I feel like that's where things are not going to be on the same level, but I might be wrong. For ABH, we have Cinder. And for W7, we have Desire. For ABH, we have Pearl. I love this shade. And for W7, Oyster. ABH has Steampunk. W7 has Champagne. We then have Teak for ABH and Illicit for W7. For ABH, we have Rose Quartz. And for W7, Strawberries. For ABH, this is the shade Amber. And for W7, the shade is called Allure. And last but not least, ABH gives you Cyborg. And W7 gives you Temptation. Okay, I'm a bit baffled by this. I don't get it. Now, some of these metallics definitely have less pigment, less shine. Like you can see that pink, like champagne pink here, definitely is not the same. This one as well, I think you can tell that the reflection is not the same. It's not on the same level. Same thing for this. It's even a bit different in the shade. This one is more brown, but yeah, some of these are actually nice dupes. So based on the swatches, I think it's fair to say that some of the shades are different, are differently pigmented, don't have the same intensity, but I mean, those swatches were not bad. They weren't. I'm kind of shocked, but we need to keep in mind that a swatch is only a swatch. It doesn't really show how a shadow is going to work on the eyes. So you can have palettes that swatch horribly, but then they blend well and it's nice to work with. And you can have palettes that swatch nicely, but that, you know, the shadows are just awful to work with. So let's see if that's the case here. So I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to start with my ABH and then I will go in with W7. It's a bit weird. I usually start with this eye for some reason, but let's just do it. I'm also going to use the same brush every time. I'm simply going to take my little sponge here so that I can remove the pigment of my brush and then use it again. That way we are 100% fair. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is take the shade right here and not put it all over, but mostly in my crease so that the next shadows I use blend nicely. I'm then gonna use the shade Twig, which I told you it's my favorite. I'm keeping the same brush, I'm just cleaning it, and I'm gonna work this in my crease. Adding a little bit more on the outside. And now that there's almost no pigment left on my brush, I'm gonna blend it out and up a little bit. Cleaning and doing the same thing. So this is the shade Touch. This one needs a bit more of going back into the pan and adding color because it's not straight away as pigmented. So let's just do that to make these match. Now that there's almost no pigment left on my brush, same thing, I'm gonna blend it up and out a little bit. Yeah, the shade, I don't know if you can tell, the shade right here and there. Here it's not pigmented the same way and it doesn't really build up the way I wish it was. I think we're getting there. When it comes to the blend, this is okay to blend, honestly. It's not, you know, patchy or anything. I think it's fine. Then again, like I said, this one is less pigmented. So now I'm going to take a different brush. I'm going to use, what should I do? I'm going to use the shade Dystopian, which is a dark brown. You can see the brush is coated just on one side. And I'm going to work this in my outer, oh shoot. See? Let's act as if nothing happened. The brush is coated. I'm going to work this in my outer corner. Going back in with my blending brush. cleaning my brush. So there is still some of the pigment, but you can see nothing is happening. So I'm taking the shade Vamp, which is supposed to be the same. Brush is coated. Blending. I feel like I'm losing some of the pigment when I blend it, which can happen. So I just want to show you what I mean when I say that some of the pigment gets lost as you blend it. So in a way, the shadow is going to blend nicely and it's not going to be patchy, but you're going to lose the pigment. You're going to have to reapply to get something deeper. So you see, I go like this, and it lost a lot of the pigment. It's super nicely blended into the rest of my eye, but I don't have my dark brown outer corner anymore. Whereas here, I am blending the edges, but I'm not diffusing the eyeshadow as much. So let me just go back in and darken the outer corner again. Okay, I think we have something quite similar now. So I'm going to use my finger because that's what I would normally do. I'm going to go in with the shade Amber. Finger is loaded. I'm being very gentle with it. I don't want something crazy out there. And now I'm using Allure from the W7 palette, and I'm gonna do the same thing. Fingers loaded. I mean, this one is more luminous, right? Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, maybe you don't like that, but I feel like this one has more shine and reflect, and that one is a bit more brown. But it did apply nicely with the finger as well as this one, and don't really have any fallout, so that's good. Now, because I want to add a bit of a shine, I'm gonna go back to this brush that I just cleaned, and for ABH, I'm going into Steampunk. I'm not wetting my brush, I'm just packing some of it here. And I'm gonna pat this all over. And also going more into the inner corner. Cleaning the brush. And in the W7 palette, this is the shade Champagne. Not wetting the brush, loading it, and tapping all over. Yeah, again, it's not as luminous, it's not as golden, but it's not half bad. I did get a bit of fallout though. Now I'm going to take an itty bitty brush and go into Pearl, not wetting it either. This one is super crumbly from ABH, I know that. Like this palette looks dirty as hell because of this shade in particular. I love it though. I really love it. It's crumbly. It's not the easiest to work with, but it's just so beautiful. So I'm doing my inner corner and I'm going down here. Cleaning. And in the W7, this is the shade Oyster, which actually is easier to pick up on a brush. Now I'm going to use an angle brush and I'm going to go into the shade Noir, which is black, and I'm going to use it to line my eyes on the side. I'm gonna leave it at that for the moment. Cleaning this. And I'm going into Fishnets. I love this name, I don't know why. Okay, so there's definitely a difference in intensity, where this one is like super black. It looks really like a line. This one gives a bit more of a smoky effect, if you know what I mean. So yeah, definitely the black from ABH is more intense. To be fair though, like I said, a true deep black is not something you see often in affordable palettes, even in high-end palettes, actually. And the ABH black in this palette is particularly amazing. So I'm gonna go back in with the Sultry and I'm gonna try to make a little bit of a wing. Let's just see where it takes us. So now I'm trying to diffuse this color a little bit because I know it's not going to be as pigmented on the other side. So I'm trying to have it not be as black. W7. Okay, so the good thing about this W7 black and the fact that it's less pigmented, less intense, is that if you're a beginner and you're using the black on Sultry, you're gonna be like, oh, what the hell am I gonna do with this? This is definitely easier to work with if you knew at makeup and you're not there yet, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be too out there. So this black is good if you want some room for error, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to smoke it out a little bit down there. Same thing here. Now, just to add a touch of color, I'm going to use the shade Bloom in the ABH. And I'm blending this into the black and the metallic shade. Same thing, different palette. This one is actually a bit more pigmented. I'm gonna go do lashes, all that stuff, and I will be right back. Okay, so I'm ready to give you my final thoughts, and I must say I was proved wrong today. I totally expected this to be a dud. I thought this was gonna lack in pigmentation and blendability. I really thought I was gonna use a shit palette. I thought I was gonna end up with two eyes looking completely differently when it comes to, like I said, the pigment and how well blended it would all be together. This is actually not bad, I must say. I don't know how they do it. Now, there are a few shades where you can see the lack of pigment. I'm thinking about the black in particular, but like I said, blacks typically in affordable and even high-end eyeshadows are rarely as black as you would like them to be. The shade Twig, also from ABH, was a bit more pigmented, so there were a few shades here and there that showed more pigment on the ABH side. The upside of this when it comes to W7 is that it makes the shadows easier to blend in a way. Although, like I said, and I showed you, I feel like they kind of blend away and you don't really see the pigment anymore. So you can blend the color easily with the W7 palette, but then you lose most of the pigment that you had. So you definitely need to build it up a bit more when you use the W7 palette. But like I said, for a beginner in makeup, that might actually be a good thing, because then you can really take your time. You don't end up with like a big splotch of color that you don't really know how to blend properly. So that might be just as well for you. The shade Bloom for ABH, so that's the coral I have a bit under here. I was shocked when I swatched it because it's actually super pigmented in the W7 palette. I think it's actually more pigmented than in the ABH. It blended nicely. Like I said, I feel like I lose a bit of the pigment, and when I blended it with the black, it ends up a bit more muddy than I would like it to be. But honestly, I'm really nitpicking here. At the end of the day, it's a beautiful color. It's very vibrant, very pigmented. Now the shimmers, the metallic shades, I really thought that was going to be crap. I thought it was going to be nothing comparable to the ABH shimmers, which in this palette in particular are just beautiful. The shades, the texture, some of them are a bit tricky to work with, like the shade Pearl. I love this, but oh my god, look how messy this is. So again, if you're a beginner at makeup, some of the shimmers from ABH might be a bit too intense for you or too difficult to work with. You might have to wet the brush for it to stick on the brush, whereas in this palette, the shimmers are a bit easier to grab. You know, like I can just do this and my finger is coated and it's not as crumbly as the ABH is. Like I said, I don't mind, but I can understand the different perspective coming from someone who doesn't have that much experience with makeup or just doesn't want to be bothered with a crumbly shade. So like I said, the shimmers, the metallics in this palette are actually okay. They're definitely nice. You can tell a difference. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but I definitely can tell in person. The ABH is more reflective of the light. It's more shimmery. It's more beautiful. But if you use a shimmer from that palette, you're not gonna be, oh my god, there's nothing on my eye. You know, they're not lackluster, honestly. That's the thing that surprised me the most, is that when you look at it, they really look like nothing, but they're actually nice. So in the end, would I say that the W7 palette is a good dupe for the Sultry? Yes, it is. I have to admit that you can achieve basically the same look, maybe less vibrant with the W7, but it's going to be pretty much the same. I'm going to stand firm on my position that if you love makeup, you love this color story from ABH, but you cannot afford to buy the ABH, or if unfortunately you cannot put your hands on the ABH because, like I said, I think it was limited edition, would I blame you if you were to buy this palette? No. I get it. I love makeup. I love spending my money on makeup. But if I'm given two options that look pretty much the same and one is a lot cheaper, I'm going to do like anybody else would, and I'm going to go for the less expensive version. However, as someone who knows and loves makeup and knows, despite the fact that I've never developed a makeup product, I am all the time my nose in makeup and makeup videos and makeup brand websites, reading about how things are made, how much time it takes to create a palette, to find the right shades and all of that. And because of it, I cannot back this palette with that feeling like it's stealing. I'm sorry, it's stealing. For a brand to release the same kind of palette with the same kind of vibes, the same kind of shades, I mean, it's fair game. They all draw inspirations from one another. At this point in the makeup industry, there's never going to be one palette that's like, oh my god, revolutionary and it's never been done before. I mean, look at how many different nude palettes I have that look pretty much the same. It doesn't mean that a brand copied, you know? So getting inspired and doing something quite similar is one thing, but you cannot argue that this is definitely a copy. The goal is to do the same thing down to the packaging for less money. As fair as that may sound, from a customer point of view, wanting to get that palette for cheaper, it's not fair to the people who worked on this ABH palette, and it just doesn't feel right. So that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to my channel because it's free, so why wouldn't you? And I will see you guys next time. Bye!